me? This is in a sense going to be very difficult because I have a lot of stories to tell and you have a lot of stories to tell, and I want to talk to each of you individually, and I can't, and it's going to make it very, very difficult. But we'll do what we can and interrupt me to some degree if you want to. It's not formally planned, but what we'll try to do is kind of review a little history of this campus way back. That means my era, and your era, which would be the 60s, and then, you know, what's happened right now, where it is now. And as I was reflecting upon this, I was realizing, you know, you guys, and I'm talking about the 68 people now particularly, and there's others here I know, you were really here in the heyday of this campus. There's no doubt about it, you know, in terms of economics and all. And so let me just start a little bit with that beginning. It's probably familiar to some of you, but you know, when you went right down this street and up the campus right there, up that sidewalk where the gates are, is where Thorn Hall used to stand. And I think you know that when Thorn came out from Ohio to open this college in 1900, he was here only 3 or 4 weeks, and the one building that the church bought burnt down in a thunderstorm. And they were ready to start college. Well, to go back even further, you know, it was these German people who were trying to serve that formed this church that became the EUB Church, both Evangelical and United Brethren, back in the 1700s. And they were serving primarily the Germans. That's who they were dealing with. And all of these years, we've had trouble figuring out how to accept people. And you think we're going through it now? Absolutely, you know. But it isn't like it's brand new. It's always been the case. So anyhow, that church was primarily east, and they decided they wanted a college out here. So we had in this city, thanks to Jacob Wernley, who was a good old Swiss German, of which Marty is as well, he had started the Lamar's Business and Normal School. And there were some problems with that too, and the church ended up buying that building and this campus and called it the Western Union College, because it was the union of the Western conferences out here, Iowa, Minnesota, Kansas, Dakotas, and so forth, and it became Western Union College. Okay, so that's how we got started, and I'm trying to primarily say that there was a German background here that we'll touch on a little later. So there was Thorn Hall, just to review a little bit what was. Right in here was Dubs, roughly. The east end of Dubs was primarily in line with what was, when you were here, the Home Ec building, I suppose. So it's about right here in front of you was Dubs Hall. Okay, so if we look at other places, things that are missing in that empty lot there, originally was the first president's house, where a president built for President Thorn. And then eventually that was sold, and they bought the house up here later on to become the president's house. That house was moved out to Kingsley, still exists, when they built the Science Hall here in your era, right? Okay, the old Science Hall was over on this corner. You will recall that I think when the new one was built, that became known as the Development Psychology Building primarily, and it changed its useful purposes several times along the way. Okay, another German background I think I ought to give a little bit that you might relate to. You knew this church here as Calvary United Methodist Church. But if you go back a little bit further, if you would go down to Central Avenue and go down to 4th Street, on the right-hand side, there is an empty lot yet. That is where the Emmanuel evangelical church sat. And it was also called the German Evangelical Church. That's what it served. If you go down this street, right straight down from Thornhall to 6th Street, there's now two houses where there was once located what was known as Hildreth Memorial United Methodist Church. But if we go back a little bit further, there was, I think, a Free Methodist church that sat there that didn't amount to much, never grew, and it was sort of available. And when the college started in 1900, they essentially said, that church said, you know, we can't just serve Germans. We better do something with these kids who expect something other than German. So they bought that church and started Washington Street Chapel. So we had the evangelical church with an English congregation and an evangelical church that was German. And then they finally brought these together and built Hildreth Memorial on that same site where Washington Street Chapel had been. And then finally, when that was condemned, after our graduation ceremony, we were the last class to graduate in that church where the graduations were usually held. We were the last class. They condemned that church, and then they started construction on this one, and this opened, I think, in '55. Okay, I think from within view that kind of lays out what was. Oh, I should point out one other thing. We had Thornhall only as the main building. The next building that was built to add something to this campus was Union Hall, which sat on that far corner of this complex, and that was the first dormitory. Originally, it was men's and women's, believe it or not, way back in 1904. 1 floor men, 1 floor women, with a dining hall and a few little facilities. A frame house-like looking building, Union Hall. Torn down before you came, I think. 64 maybe, that went down?
Yeah. It was still there.
Okay, so you maybe saw a part of that. Okay, any other questions that you have at this point?
I just wanted to give you our latest piece of news. About, close to a year ago, we started work on being recognized as a Methodist historic site in Iowa. We got it. We got encouraged, and we went for, just this week I heard we got it, we went for the National Historic Landmark designation, and we got it.
And we should at least mention the eagle, which I almost underlooked. All right. That is above us. It was dedicated just about a year ago with a major leading gift from Steve and Barb Wernley. Where is Steve? He's running around here.
He's over there.
Okay. With our major lead gift in honor of Jacob Wernley, who was Barb Collins' grandfather. So this is an honor. And I have really enjoyed, I'll just say, watching this sculpture develop. Because it was designed with metal that would rust, except the head portion was stainless steel. So gradually, in this year, the body has rusted and turned dull brown, and the head stands out as stainless steel, essentially, as a shining bald eagle symbol. Okay, anything else? What does it weigh? Oh man, I knew at one time, I don't anymore. 1,400 pounds, yeah. And each of those feathers was individually cut by Terry Utesh, the artist, and I don't know why he has any hands left. They're just sharp, vicious pieces of metal that he was working with every day. For a year, you know, or more, he was working on that sculpture. 3 years, okay. Two years, okay. Anything else? All right, let's walk a little bit. I will comment while we're here. This is Westmar Park, Westmar Memorial Park. The Jeep is not included. It stops about by the bell tower. This portion behind here to the south is Veterans Memorial Park, and that includes the Jeep. And it is a fine park if you get a chance to walk through that. You know, there's a monument for every war. And now Marty had this silly idea of making that bell useful for something, since we don't win basketball games anymore. And so I put a list together that matches those monuments. So on the date that each war ended, I come up and ring the bell. Now, essentially, it doesn't mean anything to anyone else. There's no crowd gathers around or anything, but I still come up and ring the bell. The next ringing that won't be for war will be the 4th of July. I'll come up and ring the bell. Okay. I should be ringing it today. Yes, I have the key. I could. So once we turn you loose and I get rid of all of you, maybe I'll go ring the bell.
I'll be hiding behind that tree with my camera.
Okay. What?
Is that the bell that used to be up in Thorn?
No, it is not. And again, that raises interesting stories. There are more stories about that bell in Thorn than you could shake a stick at. I wonder how many groups have secretly rung that bell with strings out to the field, and how many are telling the story from what they've heard from someone else. I can't really know, but I know it happens some. But what's that?
To the bell?
All right, the bell tower, the bell in Thorn. Actually, I got the true story a number of years ago from Dick Carey in Des Moines, who was a member of my class. He was a local Lamar student. He and Steve Collins, is it your father, Bob Collins, Steve? Yeah, they were asked to go up, and the Collins have been in the Wells, the foundry here in Lamar's for years, metal skills. So they were asked to go up and demolish that bell because it was cracked and in bad shape. And they went up with a sledgehammer and broke it up and tossed the pieces over the edge. That's where that bell. This bell came from the church in Nebraska, Dr. Ulrich's church, Hoskins, Nebraska, donated that particular bell. The bell, just to add one more note, the bell in the Calvary Church has been in 3 churches. It was in that German Evangelical Church down on Central. It was moved to Hildreth Memorial Church that I mentioned down on 2nd Avenue. And then it was moved here to this bell, to this church. So it's in its 3rd church.
Was there a house on campus that girls lived in?
Well, yes. Now, the periphery of the campus has a lot of various houses. This house over here, girls lived in.
That's what I remember.
This house that was the first president's house, girls lived in. And it goes by different names. It was called the Martin House, because Milton Martin lived in it for a while when he first came. It was called the Larson House, because Professor Larson in education lived in it for a while. So these names change as...
Poling and Schuling.
Yes, and Poling and Schuling House was there. Yeah. And Poling, interestingly enough, comes from... he was president here only a couple years. There was a President Poling. And he was the father or grandfather of, you remember the story of World War II of these 4 chaplains that hooked hands and went down with a ship? A Jew, a Catholic, a Protestant, and something. It's kind of a famous story. They gave their life jackets up to the rest of the people on the ship, and they went down holding hands together. What?
On which ship?
I don't think I can say, but we can check that out. But Poling was one of those chaplains. So it's related to at least Westmar indirectly. Okay, anything else? This is the problem with this. It's a good problem. All right.
But yeah, and then 68, then I think after that it all started going downhill.
Yeah.
Because the Methodists were...
Yeah, and I would agree. And we're in the middle of another couple of locations. Over here is the library. As you know, that was built in 1950. One of the ways I can pinpoint it is that I came to college as a freshman in 1949, and one of our tasks as young students was to guard that building under construction when we were going to play Buena Vista in football. So we guarded all night long in the building to protect it from vandalism from Buena Vista. And then it was added on to in 1970 something, I think, that addition. It is the one building remaining of the campus complex which has been sold to a private party, but essentially which nothing has been done. They talk about it becoming a family restaurant, but it isn't happening, and we're 20 years plus now since it closed. So what's going to happen to that building is still sort of up in the air. I want to, and this is a deviant story, I would love to have the capital funds to make it into an apartment complex called Westmar Eagle Apartments or something. And I want to live in the apartment where the president's office was, overlooking this particular campus. And then while I live there, we can renovate the rest. All right, the other building that I want to point out is this one right behind that you can see through the trees. That would be the third building that was built on campus. Thorne, then Union Hall. This was the original gymnasium in 1908. If you go, when I came to college, it was still the remnants of a gym. You could still see markings on the floor, and if you go in it now, although it all has suspended ceilings, and go and look up through the manhole into the attic, all of the ceiling in that attic is finished with varnished tongue and groove lumber, because it was the ceiling of that original gym. There was no spectator space, you know. Gyms were built for participation, just like most yoga places don't have spectator place. You know, you did this for the participation. No rah-rahs for you, Woody. You had to do it on your own, okay? So, and then from then on, it's changed, of course, a number of times. But remember, in 1908, when that was built, basketball as a game was only roughly, 15 years old. It was new. They were playing outside. They were playing in barns. They didn't have, so having an indoor facility was sort of new. It was the first one in town in 1908. And then later the high school built one in 1925, and that became the big gym. And then Westmar built their next one, which we'll get to, in 1941, and that became the big gym. Now, to show where we've gone in our societal direction, I think Lamar's High School now has 4 gyms? What? 2 at the high school, 2 at the middle school. Yeah, so 4 gyms, I think. So it just kind of points out what's happened to our society.
I think that our graduation ceremony was in the gym.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay. But not this one.
No.
The 41.
The next one we're coming to.
Yeah.
We'll get there in a moment to that next one.
That water tower wasn't there either.
No, that was the tennis courts. Okay.
I lost some great matches.
A question? Or just, okay, anything else? All right, let's go around the corner.
I met Darrell Weaver for the first time right there on that corner. Bill introduced me.
They're here.
Outside here, you mean?
Right there on that corner. And he said, well, are you coming here to play basketball? And Milt kind of, no.
Don't even think it.
Don't you have a key to get in so we can see those?
We will. You did, yes. Yes.
Sorry.
It's interesting that you ask, because it was about 9:15. I said, doggone, I didn't arrange to get in the gym. So I had to hustle around and find someone. So we'll get in the gym. Okay, So that was the first gym. Now it has gone through several changes, of course. It became the home ec department. The art department was in the basement. Then when the college closed, Barbara Wells bought it for an art studio for a while and owned it. And then it came back to, then it was a daycare center for a while, a private group organized. And now it's a teen center for Lamar's, essentially the asylum, which is essentially the teen center. And originally, when I was in school, this was a taller building, so it has been shortened. It has been shortened and brick veneered. It was a wood frame, taller building originally. So they shrunk it down and brick veneered it, and there was no entry on this side. The entry was facing the campus on the other side. And there used to be a row of little house trailers there. That's where I went to get my haircut in my college days. Ray Scott was the...
Dr. Marty, my wife says I never did learn the good table manners that were supposed to be taught there.
Yeah, well, they tried to teach good behavior. They taught a course known as social customs. Social customs.
Nelson taught me which fork to use.
Yes, and I remember often faculty were invited to these, and I shouldn't probably tell this story, but boy, one night we went and they had for dessert, what do you call these meringue things, baked meringue things?
Alaska.
Maybe. And they were so hard, you'd try to cut them and they'd fly off the plate. I remember it was an embarrassing, it was hard to be socially appropriate breaking up those things. Okay, the dorm complex. In the after World War II, things started to change on campus. A lot of students were coming back with the GI Bill. So there was dramatic change. That's when these buildings went up, 47, 49, right in that era. So I moved into this as a freshman, and it was a brand new dorm in 1949, and lived in it the 4 years. The married student apartments were back there, built at the same time. Along that street, across from those dorms, was a row of barracks that were moved in from the Sioux City Air Base. And that became married student housing over there. Now, so that was part of that after the war. Actually, the old science hall that became development site was remnants of those barracks buildings also. They were put together. It was put together as a T. And also the industrial arts building that you might remember that we'll get to, that was also a remnant of that. This, like they say, was the tennis courts where the towers have gone up. That was called Eastview. Eastview. It was a married student called Eastview.
And the dorms for
And to show how ubiquitous and widespread Westmar is, our daughter lived in Texas for some years. And, you know, she doesn't normally talk about Iowa and where she's from, except, you know, casually. But when they were going to leave Texas, everyone started focusing more on where she had come from. And Iowa came into the conversation. And we loved to go to her church. And one of the choir director was a guy by the name of Buddy Matei. And, you know, I didn't think anything about Buddy Matei. I liked him as a song leader and all that sort of thing. But as we were there that last week or so before she moved, he said to me something like, you know, my dad taught in Iowa at one time, some little college, and he thought they were kind of funny. There's things you couldn't do and so forth. And I got to remembering that Matei was here my freshman year in music. And I started asking people about Matei, and I said, oh man, they said he would keep time as he was walking across campus. He was so musical. But I then gathered together pictures out of the yearbooks. I had pictures of his dad in his apartment in Eastview, and sent some of these pictures to him out of the yearbook. So it was another interesting Westmar connection. All right, I want to talk a bit about this one and get a little bit historical. 1941, this was built, right smack in the middle of World War II. Just started, in fact. Pearl Harbor was bombed, December 7th, 1941. So steel was a problem to get. It was lucky they essentially had it going in process. If you go to the museum, you'll find there's a model of this in the Westmar room of the museum. And one of the interesting things is it shows this as a very symmetrical building, that model, and this is a three-dimensional model. It shows men's locker rooms like they are on that side, and women's locker rooms like they aren't on this side. They never got built. So there was always a shared space over there. It shows a space out front here that was sort of an entry, and I think they decided at the last minute to make it all the way up and put that balcony that you remember from the gym. That wasn't originally in the design. And then it became offices. And if you remember that balcony from your era, it later became offices, all of it, but it wasn't, I don't think, in your day yet. My kids tell me that we were awful parents. They said that you used to send us up to that balcony and watch the ball game and forget all about us. And we were up there breaking our necks on that jungle gym, that equipment up in that balcony. All right, in 1941, remember there was a war on. And who were our enemies? Japanese and Germans. I probably shouldn't be lecturing you this morning, but I really am tempted to read an editorial from the 1941 Gleam, in part because it was written by Arnold Marzolf, who is a German out of the coal mining area of North Dakota. And he happened to be, by the time we were growing up, my wife's youth pastor in Bismarck, North Dakota. So we had close attachment to this Arnold Marzolf. And here's what Arnold Marzolf wrote as an editorial in the Gleam. It's a paragraph or two, so just listen to this. And it's talking about this building. The title is Nationalism versus Patriotism.
Ring a bell.
If communism is socialism in a hurry, as a certain historian once said, then nationalism is patriotism in an uproar. Now remember, this is written by a college kid, editor of the Gleam. When one can sing enthusiastically, God bless America, with an I don't give a darn attitude toward the rest of the world, that's nationalism, not patriotism. Now you might think I'm getting political here, but I'm just reading from the Gleam. And this is the key thing related to this gym, this next paragraph. When a schism occurs in a city because a new gymnasium has written on its pretentious facade the words of a German poet instead of an American, and the words they wanted to write on that didn't get on, but it was being discussed, one cannot always be a hero, but one can always be a man, by Goethe, a German. That's nationalism, not patriotism. When people forget that every effect has either a social, economical, political, or religious cause, and try to make the adjustment by merely letting their emotions run wild, that's nationalism, not patriotism. When people are willing to subordinate all to militaristic interests, that's nationalism, not patriotism. Patriotism is love for one's country. It's that kind of love that recognizes values, rights, and duties. It's love for one's country that desires all peoples to be blessed with the same blessings wherewith we are blessed. It's that love which knows that values are universal and not bound by country, race, or language. It's a love that tries to find the cause of an effect and then attempts to correct the cause, not blast the effect. It's a love for one's country that puts God above things, self, and country. It's a love that constrains one to make the sacrifice of life, if it must be, to preserve truth, liberty, and justice when all other means of obtaining these have been tried and have failed. A.H. Marzoff, editor of the Gleam, 1941. Yeah, that'd be a good idea. We can do that. We need those ideas. All right, so that's the gym. Let's go around to the others. Well, let me say, just while we're here, and you know, the next big jump in building after these 40s was in your 60s. That was the other big jump. That's when you started adding dorms and so forth. Well, Weidler was in there between. Where you ate in Weidler, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
You ate in Weidler.
Half of it.
And then in 1969 is when they built the Commons here. So they really didn't eat in Weidler very long. Boy, we got a big gang here. I wonder how many are here.
When I came to college here from a big town with a brand new high school with a brand new pool, I said, they don't have a swimming pool at my college?
When you came to college?
Yeah. I thought, why did I come here? There's no swimming pool.
Yeah, you know, well, that reminds me, where were you from?
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
So we had a brand
When
new
I
high
came
school.
here, which is only 100 miles away, one of my reactions was similar, only it had to do with the fairgrounds. We had a fairgrounds where they had a dirt track and car racing. We got here, they didn't have much of anything. And we thought, man, what a dumpy place. But now the Plymouth County Fair in July, a week, is one of the biggest county fairs in the state. It's really going. Okay, can you hear me in here? Can you hear me? All right, many things you'll remember about this. Lectures, recitals, graduations, basketball games, wrestling matches. Woody Winter here had many pins that we watched him chewing his bubble gum and pinning his opponent. And I don't know if he used his bubble gum in the process, but he always had it. Okay? So, but when this was talked about, the city, when they talked about changing this to this, it was a pretty controversial because you start getting humidity in a building that is basically wood rafters. What's this going to amount to? So it was controversial in a number of ways. When they finally decided to go ahead and start construction, and here if you remember the details, there used to be 2 doors on this inn, this west inn. But when they started construction and excavated along the foundation, something wasn't calculated right and that whole wall fell out. You can see where they rebuilt the roof right there, different from this roof. So that was all rebuilt without the doors in it now. The other thing they encountered when they started building this, they wanted to make this pool, but apparently no one recognized that these big iron beams were tied together at the bottom with a big cable that went all the way from the base of one to the base of the other. And they started encountering that cable, so then they had to change plans and eliminate the cable and re-pour massive footings around those pillars that existed. Someone asked why there isn't water in it now, and it's because this is used in the winter, and across the street is the city pool that is used in the summer. And that person's reply here, well, that sounds reasonable. But I said, you know, why not just put a roof over the outdoor one and have only one system to maintain? So you know, we don't always agree on what solutions are to a problem, but we find a solution. All right, and of course it has the lap pool. It has a river pool here with running water so you can work against the stream. This is the party space for the kids and their play space. Up above in the balcony, that used to be, since your time, all offices at one time, from one side to another. Now that's cleared out, and that becomes the party space for serving the ice cream and so forth when they have birthday parties in here and all. So it's a pretty good thing, and it's well used, very well used. Okay, that gives you a sense of this place that has changed. All right, let's go out, and you can go out the same alley and then go into the main gym rather than outside for just a minute. Okay, this is sort of another symbol of a challenge that Westmar has faced through the years, and that is financing the projects. I'll mention two things. One is when Thorne was going to be remodeled. They had money enough, they renovated the basement, they ran out of money, and it sat there with the pretty well gutted and empty, and it started shifting, and they finally demolished it. In other words, the whole act wasn't together before they started. The same is sort of true here. This started construction in 1983, and we were recruiting students saying, you will have a new gym, you will have a new gym, you will have a new gym. Well, it finally got finished with funding from the Japanese when we joined with them in 1990. That's 7 years. So it's just an indication again of the struggle that went on. And when people ask what really happened, that Westmar closed, you know, very facetiously I say there's two reasons that are very clear. One is the alumni didn't give enough, and the other is the faculty got paid too much. So those two things in combination meant you didn't have money to pay the bills. And that's about all there's to it. But seriously, I was pretty active in United Methodist Church back in the 80s, well, back in the 60s particularly. I was at the General Conference 4 or 5 times when the EUBs were joining with the Methodists. I don't think we anticipated what an impact it would have, because, you know, we were the only college west of the Mississippi River, which means we drew from California, Washington, Texas, Oklahoma, the Dakotas, and all. Once we made the merger, we were one of 5 United Methodist colleges in Iowa alone. So funding changed, our support changed out there, our student enrollment changed. So there were some major challenges that came along with it. And the fact that we were over-colleged in rural northwest Iowa. You know, within 50 miles of here, we still have a bunch of colleges. But no one wants to say, well, I'll give up mine, there's too many. So anyhow, that's the way it is. It served good times. So it illustrates that particular thing. This complex, the swimming pool and this, when the college closed, the city had a YMCA organization, but no facility. So they grabbed onto this with the city. So the city owns this yet and leases it, I think, to the Y. Anyhow, the Y runs this in combination with the city recreation department, and it's become a very well-used and growing facility. So that's basically the story that we have here. So this is a city-Y building here. As we came by those dormitories, almost all the dormitories have been sold to private parties and turned into apartments. I didn't get that mentioned, but they've gutted the walls, and that'd be true for the men's dorms, for Bone Break down there. And the other thing economically I was going to mention is, and you know, everyone has their theories, but I talked to someone in the last few months who said, and who was president when you were here? Callis.
Smith at the end.
Yeah, Smith at the end. But someone commented that it was, and he's deceased, so I guess we can talk about him whatever we want, but said President Callis is the one who really wrecked this college. President Callis is the one that really wrecked this college. and here's his reasoning, just to hear what people say. He said he's the one who sold some of our farms and started building, using that money to build all of these bricks and mortar buildings. And once our enrollment started going down, we were still paying for bricks and mortar with literally the blood and guts of faculty salaries and so forth, because the roofs have to be repaired and so forth. And so, you know, Callis did some great things, and a lot of you know what he did. But you get different points of view that come out, and that's what happens. Okay, any other questions in here? It's hard to talk. Let's gather on the balcony for just a bit, straight out. Over your shoulder there, I should have reminded you, you know, when I was in school, to put this all in perspective, that was the football field. That was the football field. It ended about right here. In fact, when they were building that funeral home after the college closed, they were running into some junk and so forth that was at the end of the football field that they were gathering. So that was the field. In 1959, they built the stadium that you knew down by the high school. And then in 1983, I think, the college wasn't keeping it up like they should have, and they sold it to the high school, and we started renting it from them instead of them renting it for us for the football games and so forth. So that's the basic change that was there. This again was the Industrial Arts Building. It was originally T-shaped, you might recall, and the T came off when they built the Wellness Center here in the 90s. Okay, and so that's an old barracks yet here. This was built in your era, I think, Bone Break Hall.
64 was the first class.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that was the 60s when that was.
They called it Blue Dorm. I lived there over
Yeah,
4 years.
didn't have any. Panty Raid, Bay of Pigs. Bay of Pigs, does that relate?
No.
Oh, they used to talk about that little covey in there as the Bay of Pigs. Yeah, people can get pretty crude at times. Yeah. All right, we can't see it from here, but just beyond this building now is where Wernley stood. Okay, and then Weidler is there, you can see. That is now a city building used primarily for various social services, Plains Area Mental Health Clinic, Mid-Sioux Opportunity, and there's some daycare in there. That shaft, that higher little shaft on this end, they've added an elevator when they restored this, when the city remodeled that for this multi-purpose use. So in just summary, you know, from here, as we talk about buildings, the city still owns this building, Weidler Hall, this dining facility, which was the Commons, is now the city's convention center. It's used for meetings, and it's been well remodeled, and weddings and wedding receptions, and is highly booked. It's a very popular place.
That's where we eat.
What?
That's where we eat tonight.
No. You're eating downtown.
There's an event center.
Yeah, the Browns, were they here when you were here in school? What? No, Browns would have been here in the 70s. Yes.
Okay, the parents.
In the 70s. You were here in the late 60s. They were here in the 70s. And they are famous family singers, really, as a family in Branson and all. You've probably heard them. And in the last few years, they have decided to sort of come home rather than touring all over, and they built the Brown Century Theater, where they perform regularly and have busloads come here instead of going to Branson. So they have a whole summer schedule where they sing and perform, mostly, you know, patriotic, gospel, so forth type of music. And then just in this last year, they bought another building, which they called Central Cultural Center, and where they serve dinners before their performance, primarily.
And that's where our dinner is.
And they are Westmar alums, Keith and Shelley Brown. Shelley Brown started out as sort of a trio of farm wives that were singing. And then some dropped out, and her kids grew up, and finally they became focused on their whole family. All right, a couple other things here. Someone already mentioned the laundromat here. All right, originally that began as a kind of a smaller building, the heating plant. Yeah. And that provides central heat to many of the buildings, Wernley, library, and we had tunnels that became famous. Some people got into the tunnels, some did not. And students would live in the heating plant, and shovel snow in the morning when it snowed and do the women's sheets. I don't know why the women got their sheets washed by the guys in the heating plant and the men did not, but that was a common practice because they need shirts. Yeah, they ironed your shirts. Yeah, so it was pretty crude living. 2 or 3 those guys that lived in the heating plant. Then they added a maintenance shop to that heating plant, so that extended it to the east, and they added the laundromat that extended it to the west. It was a fun operation when the city decided to tear down that heating plant. You wouldn't think it'd be particularly fun, but they sold the boilers out of that heating plant to the Hutterites in South Dakota. And they were going to use them for heating their hog facilities. And I don't know how familiar with you are with Hutterites, but they're like most of us. We don't appear to be particularly consistent. I mean, they are plain clothes type people. They wear white suspenders, they wear beards and so forth. But I visited a major Hutterite colony in Montana a number of years ago. I used one of my students that summer, and I went up there. Maybe some of you know it was the Nemishes from Montana, which would be after your day. And I cowboyed with them for 6 or 8 days. We rode out in the hills and the prairies and by the buffalo and just had a ball. But they took me to visit the Hutterites. They have one-room schools yet, but that whole school room was, the periphery was lined with computers. They had, I think, 3 or 4 shiny new Gleaner combines ready to go as soon as the wheat was ready, and about 6 Kentworth trucks lined up ready to haul the wheat. But they were plainclothes people. And out here, when they were moving those boilers, they came in here with skid loaders, flatbed trucks, and so forth to haul this away. And they were communicating with each other back and forth, these bearded guys with their wide suspenders on their cell phones, talking in German. Talking in German. And it just seemed like an interesting mix of our history and our cultures to see that go on. Yeah. Okay, you know, we can walk up the top of the hill and we're almost back to the Eagle. We're essentially completed the circle. Do you think of anything that I have seriously missed that you want to ask about?
Let's see the Coast House.
Okay, I should mention, some mentioned several. There, around the campus, as we were population pressured when you were here, there were a number of houses around the periphery that was put into use. And the Coast House is one of them. Did you live in Coast House?
No, but I knew some very wild people who did.
Yeah, they were, and some prominent people. Oh man, Bill Melton.
Yep, exactly.
Bill Melton, who invented the Verifax machine that you run your credit cards through. The Verifax was the first machine. He was a Coast House resident. Juneman, Greg Juneman, some of you might know, lived in Coast House. Greg, I think, told me that they had an alligator in there for a while. And I asked him, where do you keep it? In the bathtub. And he said, well, we don't use the bathtub very often, so it's okay. So it's okay. Okay, so yeah, we can walk up. You can maybe see the Coast House. It's a private house now. Yeah, it's still standing. Right. And the one across the street, that was also is now a private house. I think all of them are. Have been sold. Bachman House. Bachman and Schuneman, I think that's the same house. I think that's the same house. Yes. Yeah, but it went by several names again along the way. Okay, watch your step, and thank you for being. I have no idea how many we have, but I wish I could visit with every one of you, because
Asking for a show of hands, who was at the first dance?
Yeah, on campus?
Yeah, the first dance, didn't we hear?
I don't think so.
How many of you attended a dance on the Westmar campus?
We
we had it our junior year.
What?
First dance junior year, the end of the junior year. We had a sock hop in the old gym, in the 41 gym.
Okay, and they called it a dance? Okay.
My senior year.
You know, Westmar went through some interesting culture. Dancing was one of them. I wish I hadn't grown up EUB at times, because then I think I would love to dance. But now I just don't.
Off campus that hosted dances.
Yeah, remember that Episcopal or something?
Yeah, there was.
Oh, really? Could be.
Campus that would host dances like once a month or something that you could go to. Yeah, I didn't know about that.
Well, we went through the alcohol discussions. We went through the smoking discussions. I went on leave to Iowa State one semester and came back, and I said, there's more smoking on Westmar campus than there was at Iowa State.
Yeah.
You know, we vacillated in these things, as still goes on. You know, we have trouble understanding how other people think, but we need to keep trying, I guess. Yeah.
What year did they end approximately women's hours, dorm hours? That was the weirdest thing.
They always had dorm.
Women had to be in by 11 or something, or
Well, it used to be 10, yeah. If you read the old books, it was 10 o'clock.
when did that
And
end?
the men never had hours, because they reasoned if the...
Freshmen did.
Okay.
64, 65 when they put them all in Worley. That was the only year they did that, but they had an hour after the girls. And those boys tore Worley apart, those freshman boys.
Oh, okay. 'Cause that's all.
Well, I remember in our era, Westmar students were the primary high school bus drivers. And the streets used to be lined with yellow buses all day because we'd drive in the morning, come up and park. And one year we had to stay over because the school went longer than the college did. And a couple of us decided to wash clothes in the basement of Keeler. And it was on a Sunday. And we were questioning whether we should do this, and our reasoning was, well, no one's going to see us, so we won't be leading anyone astray. We should be able to wash clothes. And then Dean Thompson walked in, and we were washing clothes. Yeah, the old peer pressure. They tell, you know, I have a son-in-law who's from Holland. And some of you locals will relate to the fact that I always say he's so Dutch he doesn't understand Sioux County jokes. And one of them is, if you go fishing, be sure to take 2 Dutchmen along. Because if you take only one, he'll drink all your beer. If you take 2, he won't drink any. See? That's a peer pressure story. And peer pressure affects kids, teenagers, and adults. Believe it or not, they do. So, okay, thank you all for being. Now, I think the museum is open. I'm going to slip down to the museum, too, if you have anything you want to see down there. Okay? You ran cross country.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
I was your
you
most
did.
important runner because when I finished, we all got to go home. We could all get on the bus, so I was cheered heavily. I want to thank you.
Because all these trips I took with students to the Gulf and so forth, I always said after about the first 2 days, you could identify someone that if they were on the bus, everyone was there. So you were the one.
I was the designated.
Yes.
Are you the one they brought supper so that they could eat before you got in?
Close.
No.
Well, I probably messed up today here and there, and I remember in cross country, poor old John Allen one year, we went down to Stone Park to run, and we left him here. He just wasn't there or something, and we left. We got him down there, and he ran with us, and when we came home, we left him there. And I had to go back and get him there.
Sounds like he wasn't quite on it
Yeah.
there.
I have to have a picture with you because John and I met in your biology class and we married, so it's all because of you.
That was your first sex education.
It was. I was an R and he was an S and you had us in alphabetical order and the rest is history.
Yes.
And we did learn a few things from you too, so we appreciate it.
And I probably learned some things from you.
Yeah, so I've got to show this picture to John.
Okay. Very good.
Did you mention anything about the sundial this morning?
What?
The sundial?
You missed it.
I did. Okay. It's still there?
No, it isn't there, and that's sad. I think it got hit by a mower or something. And instead of picking up the pieces and putting it together, my understanding is the city crew picked it up and chucked it.
That must have been semi-recently then.
Well, in the last 3-4 years.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's sad.
But I'd like to get it replaced. I got stuff laid out at home. I'd like to get.
That was an important piece of the campus as far as I was
And there's a place for it there.
And I love the statement on it.
It's still the place is still there. Did you see that?
I did not. I showed up a little late.
It's there, and then there's so
I don't
we should
remember the
replace
Time
it.
Takes All But Memories if that was on
Something
the
like-
sundial or if that was on the base.
I don't either.
But
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
always thought that was
Yeah.
really an important
You're right.
part of campus.
That's a good one.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Len. Okay, thank you.
Did the inventor of the perforated pill, is he Westmar alum? I heard, the little pills that are perforated.
I don't know.
He patented that and made
I don't know. No,
millions.
I don't know that story.
Yeah, and then built a university in Japan or something.
No, that I don't know.
I'll have to look up.
Yeah.
Google.
Yeah. Right.
patented. The other thing, the WC, is that still out there? I saw the Western Union.
I could have commented on that. The WUC originally was on the corner.
Yeah.
And then they took out the U when it became Westmar College. And our foreign students used to make fun of that because WC
In German was water.
is water closet. See?
When we went to Europe with the chorale, a bunch of us took pictures in front of the WC to give to our host families. They said they thought that was the strangest thing to all have our pictures in front of the WC.
A water closet, yeah. And then they moved it over it's over now by the gates.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But when they dug that up, they found a time capsule in it. And most of it, a lot of it wasn't readable. But the front page you could still make out. And on that front page, I think it's a class of 29, was Alice Cruz, my aunt Esther Merkel, and, oh man, another missionary, not Strasser, Faust, Miriam Faust. All three left that class and went to Redbird Mission. And then Esther came back as librarian here, and yeah. Kurt Becker.
So good to see you.
So good to see you. Right.
So strong. It's amazing. My parents would have been so happy to know that.
Oh, wouldn't it be? It's interesting how just the mention of the names bring back images for your mother.
Oh, yes.
It's sitting at the piano with that solo box attached.
Oh, yeah. And you know,
remember the solo box? Yeah.
She was a part of the Hoskins Church when she was growing up.
Hoskins, Nebraska?
Yeah.
Really?
Right. So I'm going to have to take a picture of that plaque to share with
yeah.
my sister.
And your dad,
Appreciate that.
he was the pastor of our church, but my memory of him is helping haul bundles at thrashing time.
Oh, yeah.
Sweating and sitting with his straw hat and hauling bundles. That image comes to mind so clearly.
Yeah. That's true.
He probably had bib tops and no shirt.
Maybe so. Could be, yeah.